I strongly believe that the reason why most of us don't know what is our zone of genius is because we were just cogs in the wheel in a much bigger system that says, look, this is where you should operate. These are the constraints. And maybe one of 1,000, you were lucky to that coincidentally be that sort of genius. But most of us just, that's not where we at right now. And the first thing that we should actually start doing is have like an organizational culture mind shift in the sense that the businesses that will operate best in the future are businesses that will have autonomous employees, that will have employees with much higher agency.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Going Beyond the Deal podcast. Today, I have my new friend, Mr. Amos Bar Joseph, the co-founder and CEO of Swan, a company that's building AI agents to transform your go-to-market approach for modern businesses. I met Amos through, I would say one of my dear friends in the investment banking and the finance world, Mr. George Alifragas from Metropolitan. George was a guest on the show. And when George tells me you got to meet somebody, he's usually right. So very excited to have you on the show. And Amos, welcome.
Thank you so much, Michael. I wish I had, can I have just you walking with me like to every social gathering and just introducing me to people?
Absolutely. I would carry a speaker with me, and whatever song you wanted, we would just kind of like groove to it, and I'd just be your hype man.
You'd be my hype man. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
That's what I could be. I could definitely be your hype man.
You passed the test.
Yes. So I really want to, it's really interesting for me because, we're in this world with AI, and it's something that I personally have really started to embrace, right? Because if we can focus more on the things that were like more visionary things and things that I want to do for my business or how to do it, and then leveraging AI to take some of that kind of the boring maniacal things out of it and the things that are challenging to us. I've embraced AI, but I know a lot of people aren't. And it's funny, you'll appreciate this. This weekend, I sat down with my father-in-law who's 73 years old, and I said, "Do you understand AI at all?" And he's like, "I have no idea. All I hear is that it's coming to take over the world." And I go, "All right, come here, check this out." So I just started running him through some different things, and he's like, "Oh my God, like this is amazing." He said, "This is going to make a lot of idiots out there." And I was like, No. It's going to make the smart and efficient people more efficient, and I think it's just going to make things stronger. So, what is just, at a really high level, what are your thoughts on embracing AI in the workforce?
Yeah, first of all, I think, since the invention of the fire, even maybe, it's one of the most intuitive technologies, actually, that mankind has ever invented. And you showed it to your father-in-law, which is over 70, and they got it, right? Pretty much basically instantly. And you think about the internet, for example, which was like super disruptive. If you would show it back then to, your someone who's over 70s, then maybe they would say, yeah, but I don't really get it. Why is it so cool? Right? But with AI, it's not like that. We get it instantly and it's super intuitive. And what it really gives an opportunity to just everyone to excel at, right? It's not like you need to have, foundational knowledge in math or computer science, or even at the domain itself, like large language models. And all you need basically is to just jump into the deep waters with no, reinforcement, anything, and just start building and start interacting with it and just learn. You know, the crazy thing about AI in the workforce is that you can see these businesses like Swan, and we can talk about Swan in a second, that embraced AI into the business and are operating at 10x, 100x the efficiency and speed. And these businesses didn't really have anything to do with AI before that. They just said, let's just hop on the train, let's just start doing it, and that's all it takes.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It's so intuitive that I almost look at it almost like, I hate to say it, right? Like almost like carving a piece of wood. You can take this piece of wood and you can carve it, relatively basically and say, okay, I want to eventually carve this into a swan, let's say, right? And you can start kind of designing the shape of a swan, but you don't know how to make it perfect with the feathers a certain way. You don't know how to do that. And then you could take your basic idea of what a swan should look like in this wood carving, and then eventually you can use AI to help you build this beautiful masterpiece eventually. I mean, maybe I'm dumbing it down too much, but that's the way I think of it. Like for myself, it's one of those things where I've always been a creator. I was a musician for a long time, and it's like you come up with just kind of the basic idea for it, and then through the help and leveraging of AI, you can build something really, really beautiful from it at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful analogy, especially with the swan analogy.
Of course, of course. I just thought of that like right now, like right off the bat. So before we get into Swan and building AI, for your go-to-market strategies, I want to dive into Amos Bar Joseph. First off, you have an amazing name. I love it. I just think it's a great sounding name. I think it flows really well. It's very cool. But tell me about your early career path and like any of the big milestones before Swan. Like where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up? How did you kind of get from birth to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I was born and raised actually in Weizmann Institute in Israel. It's a campus for one of the most renowned universities in the world, basically in a lot of different areas. My father is a renowned physics professor and working a lot in the areas of semiconductors and matter. And I grew up to a very scientific community. We were very nerdy and very geeks. We played, Dungeons and Dragons all around the campus. Like walking in the grass and the trees, and everything was very, beautiful and serene. And it was an amazing childhood. And I think that, when I grew up, it just gave me that sense of competency that, even the most complex terms and subjects and domains in the world are accessible for me to learn and play with them, because that's like where I grew up with. Everyone were just, knew a lot of these things about the most complex areas that, the world has to offer, basically. And I was actually more like in athletics rather than, science. And I've, I was very competitive. I was an extremely competitive guy. I was in the national team in Israel for beach volley. So, instead of spending my time in, studying math or physics or things like that, where my family wish I had, I was spending my time on the beach playing beach volleyball, trying to qualify for the Olympics and playing in like, European championships and things like that. Um, the more I grew up, it took me some time to get to tech. I wasn't really like a tech person, and um, I had my computer science friends who always looked down on me and kind of like felt like I'm not, that person that really interacts well with a computer, in a sense. And I just found myself an amazing degree that really opened my eyes and changed my life, basically my life trajectory. My father sent me there. I studied called the PPE. It's an honors program in Tel Aviv. It's actually was taken from Oxford. And it's really about developing social leaders more. You study philosophy, economy, law, um, and and economics, basically. Okay, so try to look at life from all these perspectives. And
I
I've
feel like you have so many great things that kind of the great influence. Because I'll tell you right now, I'm so glad that you chased that dream of beach volleyball and things like that. Because what I take away from that is I say, you know how to execute as a team. That's a really important part of what you do now as a CEO of a company, right? Is so like for me, I dropped out of college to play in a rock band, right? So I've been used to people throwing beer bottles at me or people trying to rip my shirt off, right? So I can go pitch a deal anywhere I want, and if they boo me out of the room, it's like, yeah, I've been there, done that. Like, at least they're not going to throw a beer bottle at me now. So I think that all of this experience, but what was the inflection point when you had this? I mean, that sounds like a really amazing opportunity to have that type of education that kind of gave you this wide breadth of understanding business and economics and finance. You know socially how to do things, right? Because of your experience and what you did. You're competitive, you're hungry. So we're building all this great foundation. Where was that inflection point where you were like, "Ah,
It was where I first met my zone of genius, I would call it. And it's an important theme actually in my life and in my philosophy about how we're building Swan. Actually, we're going to talk about it very soon. But um, it was like a magical feeling that I'm in my zone of genius right now. And it's totally different than where I spent my entire life right now. And it happened um, where my passion and skills, intersected into an area where I can create disproportionate value, basically. And it was in game theory, actually, university. So I found myself in game theory. I finally, found, the hunger to pursue a specific area in education. Until then, I was like, going to classes and having fun. But then I thought, okay, first of all, I enjoy it a lot and I'm a lot better than everyone else here with little effort. So I should double down on that. And I towards the end of the degree, I started developing kind of like something of my own, like my own algorithm game theory, and got like a
break
lot of
down game theory for the listeners? Break that down for someone that doesn't understand that."
yeah. So game theory is just a way to look at life interactions, modeling them like it's a game, and you have a goal basically, and the game happens through an interaction or steps. There's like different types of games basically that you can model for, and then try to predict what will be like the rational outcome if this was a game. Okay. So it's widely used in economics. So you could try to, look at competition as a game where prices and how you charge, for products and what happened if, company A charge X and company B charge Y. And so what will happen, what will be the dynamics, and then you get to come an equilibrium at the end. That's like, a very fair outcome for most of these games. They're trying to get to an equilibrium, basically, like a dynamic, like a human dynamic that we see. And so that's like the area, and it was fascinating to me. And I've developed kind of like an algorithm of my own in that space to allocate students actually to schools in a very fair and optimized ways based on different preferences and constraints that these schools had and these the students had, etc. And that led me to eventually opening my first startup. And that's how I got to the startup life, building upon that technology that I've built and using it for a commercial application, eventually working with airlines, helping them allocate passengers to flights, which is a little bit similar to kind of like, students to schools. And we work with like the biggest airlines in the world, like Iberia, Latam, Singapore Airlines, and eventually sold that company. And I fell in love with entrepreneurship. I felt like that's my zone of genius, basically operating in entrepreneurship. And that led to another company later that I've established wherever, where we've helped some of the biggest companies in the blockchain space communicate with their customers. Based on all different types of transactions that are happening in the blockchain. They want to send different types of messages, etc. We sold that company to push the biggest player in the communication space in blockchain. And today, I'm working on Swan.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I love all this. And I just want to ask you something about game theory. It's interesting in marketing. I've had the pleasure. I'm a big health and fitness geek. I live for it. It's what provides me, my vitality. And I love helping people grow. That's my zone of genius, really helping people grow. So we always talk about these different processes when you're trying to coach someone through something, that gamifying the experience is what actually makes people kind of get into it more. Is there a connection there, or is it just,
Yes, there is a connection there because if you would gamify a specific area, then to predict the actions that users will take, you'll need to use game theory to do it. So you would say maybe we'll give coins to reward specific actions, and people, if they are rational, they will want to accrue more coins and things like. And then you'll try to model that, and you'll say what will be the equilibrium, like where would these users head towards? Maybe will they try to manipulate it? How will they try to manipulate the system? So there's a lot of different tools to evaluate the user's behavior and then to find gaps in the economic system that you've built through that gamification. So if it's like a coin, for example, that you've built, so there will be a lot of flaws in that system. So inherently, like game theory will enable you to just analyze and find these gaps, try to mitigate them with additional rules or constraints and things like that.
got it, got it. So let's get into Swan. The AI space right now is super crowded. I mean, there's everybody and their uncle are trying to get into this. Or, I can't tell you how many times I've seen somebody trying to pitch to me, hey, here's how you can use AI to improve your business. What makes Swan so unique in this really crowded space? I mean, I feel like we're in I mean, you'll probably tell me that the gold rush is gone, right? But it feels like we're in a gold rush for AI. What makes Swan unique in this space?
Yeah. So it's not, when I started building Swan, it wasn't my first rodeo, right? I built two companies before that and scaled them, etc. And they were built kind of like based on the unicorn, where you kind of like raise a lot of money before you get to product market fit. And you scale to like 40 people before you get to your first $1 million in revenue. And from there, from round to round, just grow your vision and story and total addressable market rather than the real metrics of the business. And that's how you kind of like, flow from round to round. And what you eventually build up is a very like unhealthy foundation for a company to scale. And what happened to startups over the last 15 years is that they're still operating on the same playbook. The lean startup, like it was called in 2009. Eric Ries, published a lean startup book, basically, which shared this concept of MVP. And everybody was says, "Wow, we should build MVPs." That was 2009, and we're still doing it the same. And what happened is just company was just got more and more expensive and more inefficient in the way that they operate in their early stages, and that really perpetuates to more growth stage and later stage. And at Swan, I decided it's time to reinvent playbook of how you scale company, basically. And with this notion of AI and specifically AI agents, and we can talk about what's the difference. I felt like this is the time for us to reinvent how businesses scale in the modern world. And these businesses are actually should be designed from the ground up towards human AI collaboration rather than solely human to human coordination. So instead of building managerial layers and approval processes and a lot of these meetings and bureaucracies, what we're trying to build at Swan is kind of the first autonomous business that can scale with intelligence, not just with headcount. And what we're thriving to do is how we can use AI agents so that every employee within the company operates solely in their zone of genius. AI takes care of the mundane and automates the busy work and amplifies whatever sits between your zone of genius, basically. And Swan is an AI tool that is designed to really help businesses transform their go to market operations to work in an environment like that, where AI can take care of all the mundane and automate the repetitive work, but can amplify the best people to do what they're good at.
Can you give us like a really good example of how something like this would take place? Because I really like this. I know you had a thesis about 10 million in annual recurring revenue per employee, like per actual human employee, I guess. I've seen that you write something about that. But give us a really a good example of how we could see this applicable in the real world, and how someone, like, I mean, how do you go in and find someone's zone of genius? I mean, how do you, like, the onboarding process must be really remarkable. But I mean, I'm kind of jumping all over the place because I'm thinking so much more about this, right? But the onboarding process. Can you walk me through what that would look like with a really good example of someone that would be using Swan?
Yeah. So first of all, I strongly believe that the reason why most of us don't know what is our zone of genius is because we were just cogs in the wheel in a much bigger system that says, look, this is where you should operate. These are the constraints. And maybe one of 1,000, you were lucky to that coincidentally be that zone of genius. But most of us just, that's not where we at right now. And the first thing that we should actually start doing is have like an organizational culture mind shift, in the sense that the businesses that will operate best in the future are businesses that will have autonomous employees, that will have employees with much higher agency. And that's why we're building an autonomous business, not because of an autonomous AI, actually because of an autonomous employee. That's one thing that you need to first of all embrace in this new shift that is happening. You want to encourage this agency and autonomy for your employees so they can discover that solution. That's one thing. And when you look at from a practical standpoint, what does it mean, for Swan? What does it mean for me? So what I've realized that my zone of genius in Swan is actually storytelling. I love telling the story of Swan and preaching about the autonomous business. And I'm super passionate about educating people about how to use AI in a way that really makes sense without all the BS that is out there and people that are just trying to shout off the roof, to tops, this is what you should do. So I'm very passionate about it. And what we realize is that we can use AI to amplify my storytelling so that it will generate pipeline for the business. And what we started doing at Swan, instead of the biggest misconception, which is let's automate ourselves. Let's try to look at sales development representatives that pick up the phone or send emails. Instead of hiring them, let's just get these AI agents to do that instead of us. So we didn't pick that route of automating ourselves. What we did is we asked, okay, how can we turn Amos into his like 100x version of himself? And the way to do it is by doubling down on his storytelling capabilities and building an agentic system around that storytelling. And so, okay, that still sounds a little bit amorphic. What does that mean, really? Right? And here comes the most important part. It's not like we had this amazing detective skills to understand, yeah, this is an amazing place to build an agentic system. I had a lot of bottlenecks that incorporated within this process of writing posts on LinkedIn, showing up on podcasts, etc. And so to support me, we just looked at each bottleneck and thought, how can we solve it with AI? Started building towards that and solving it in an iterative process. Every challenge unveiled a new opportunity. Every opportunity yielded a new AI agent. And that's how we got through a layer by layer. And what eventually happened is now I'm a single person go-to-market organization at Swan. I do it all by myself. I generate, last 30 days, more than 300K ARR just by myself, more than $1.5 million in pipeline. All of that is with zero marketing spend, no SDRs, all just me, my storytelling, and this army of AI agents that are amplifying that process to turn it into qualified pipeline.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I love this. I love this. So you're the only, there's no other employees?
So we're three founders, just the three of us. We have more than 200 businesses that are our customers. And we're operating not alone, with an army of AI agents that are empowering every step that we take and trying to really discover the 100x version of the seller, like the revenue person, which is me. Then we have my co-founder Ido, who is the product person. So how does the 100x product person look like? And then we have the CTO, the technical person that builds the product itself. What does it mean to look at the 100x engineer?
Very cool. So now, how are you spending the majority of your days now?
So basically, what we're seeing that is shifting here is that you're starting to manage these agents, basically. That's a lot of the work that you're doing is instead of you're doing the work, you're kind of like overseeing the work in the sense. So, for example, if I need to write a post, I try to write a 3 LinkedIn posts each week. I have more than 30,000 followers, and I try to consistently generate more than 1 million impressions every month. And that's a big part of the growth cycle that we have. And so to generate these posts, I go to Shakespeare, one of my AI agents that I work with, and I just, I have this idea about what should we write about. And then in a very collaborative process, like sharpening, a wooden swan, we finally get to a perfect post that I can post on LinkedIn, and that process takes me 20 minutes instead of like 2 hours. And then I have other agents that are surfacing leads that are interacting with these posts, basically, and they're saying, you know what, we have all these hot leads that are making me liking these posts or commenting or sending me a connection request, etc. And so I have these agents that already qualify these prospects basically and say, yeah, they're relevant, they're in market, and they engage with your content. Here's a message that here's how we recommend you to reach out. And then I ping pong with them basically on how should we reach out to these leads. I engage with them, etc. Then I have calls. I go on demos basically. So I have these agents that prep me before the call, and they tell me, look, 5 minutes before the call, this is what you need to know. I can ask them follow-up questions. Maybe I want to better understand what they're doing or learn more about that person, etc. So I send them for another task, etc. And they come back. And then I have another agents that tell me after the call, what are the tasks that, I should follow after that. I should follow up with an email, or I should schedule a call with another champion in the team, etc. And so what's happening here is that we're transitioning from doing a lot of the work ourselves to actually managing these AI workers in that sense and collaborating with them so that one person could do a job of 100 people.
I love this. I love this. I mean, do you see that this is the way business would be done in the future? I mean, it seems only logical.
Yeah, I think that we are going to experience a fundamental shift in how we interact with the computer, first of all. So instead of just, clicking buttons and using it as a tool, it will transition into kind of like this management process of working with all these AI employees simultaneously. And so instead of spending your time on just, one thing for the entire day, you'll start working over more surface areas simultaneously with all these AI workers. And the amount of productivity that a single person can gain by working like that is really, a 2 points of scale larger than what we're doing right now. It's actually crazy how much more you can gain if you know the work, you know how to delegate it, and you know how to oversee it, and you know how to do it simultaneously across multiple fronts. Then you start operating as a department, or you're just one person.
I love this. I love this. So, I mean, you don't have to, you can answer this after we stop recording this because but how many hours a week are you working?
All the week. I'm working. It's not like I'm working less. I would say maybe we're even working harder. It's just because I think it's the nature of humanity. Where with the food comes the
I mean,
appetite.
so I get it. You love to work too. You love to create. You love to work. I love working. Like that's not something I dislike. But
I love working as well, Michael. But I would say it's not even from the love of it. I actually also love spending time with my family, and I wish I had more time to spend with my family. It's just that the nature of building a fast-paced business, you just feel like there's an opportunity here. We need to double down. We need to harness more. It's not like we can just sit down and relax. And I feel like it's It's an important thing to know because it's not like AI would take care of a lot of these tasks. So we're sitting down and relaxing. We just have more productivity to harness and we have more opportunities and we just want more and more and more. That's the nature of humanity. So we won't replace us. It would just create more opportunity for wealth and for productivity.
I love this. I love this. So, you know, how so your three founder kind of structure, you're mainly focusing on storytelling. What is the your other two founders really spending the most time on?
So like the three core pillars for an autonomous business is I feel like what we represent basically at Swan. These are like the main functions that you really need. And as you grow, you need more like maybe finance and things that large organizations that don't really have dedicated functions for. But I'm in charge of revenue. Okay, so I do that through storytelling. But eventually, what I'm striving to do is to grow revenue through demand, convert that demand into pipeline, from there to deals, and then success, onboarding, etc. Right. Then we have the CTO, the engineering, which is really in charge of building the product, right? And they're not really writing code anymore. My CTO doesn't write code. Single line of code, it doesn't write anymore. It only has these AI developers that he's managing, basically, that builds the code for him, and he's overseeing their processes and requests to integrate the code, etc. And then we have the product person, which is more basically optimized to build the intelligence backbone that can support the growth of product and revenue with intelligence, not with headcount. So, what does it mean basically is that there's a dedicated function within the company that really obsess about how can we unblock, unclog, solve challenges with intelligence rather than with headcount. How can we enable revenue and product to grow faster, but without hiring more people by just applying more intelligence to the same workforce, making them better at what they do? And so that is the most innovative function within the company that every company will have. And that function is responsible for scaling with intelligence.
Got it. Got it. So now, are you guys spending how much? I mean, because there's these three distinct parts of the business, and you guys are all managing these AI agents for each specific part of the business. Then how do the three founders then interact to make sure that everybody's better way? I can't think of a better way to say it, but like marching in the right direction at the same speed, at the same pace. How do you collaborate between the three of you guys?
Yeah. So first of all, in autonomous business, we try to optimize for autonomy. So a lot of the work can get done without collaboration. Okay, and engineering can do a lot of like product, can make a lot of product decisions. And if they feel like they don't need the product decision here, they can just take it on their own and continue. And same thing for everyone in that sense. So they have much more agency and autonomy to act on their own. But what we strive to do is to define these mutual areas that we have. It's basically you look at product as a communication channel between sales, between the revenue to engineering, right? So there's a lot of like you know that basically intermediate in that sense, right? So that's like one thing that we look at how we should make sure that things don't go away. And then I think from a leadership perspective, a lot of the time that I spend in terms of alignment is vision alignment. And I feel like the companies of the future, instead of building these managerial layers and approval processes to make sure we're marching towards the right direction, what we'll try to build instead is, first of all, like vision alignment, goal setting in a much better way, and then building these systems for these employees to make sure that once vision and goal is set in the right way, so they have everything they need to operate and to march towards that.
Got it. Got it. So with all of these many things that you're doing, a guy that's working all the time, that's really, that enjoys this, how do you find balance personally?
That's a good question. So I think that I'm not being humble here, but I think that I'm doing a good job about balancing work life and coming home relaxed and not, taking back all that anxiety and pressure that I feel at work. Big part of that is having a supportive wife that is really understands the pressure that I'm at, involved in the business, asking me questions, and I can, filter it out if I want and filter it in if I need. And just be present when I'm not at work. So I feel like my cheat code is just to have this, like, kind of like my brain could separate work and personal. I come back home and I completely forget about everything and I just put it aside.
Really good. This is really good because I think that this could be a really good thing that a lot of people struggle with. Has nothing to do with AI, has nothing to do with what is the hack to finding that separation. Like for me, it used to be, and I'll give this to people, I used to, on my way into, if I had to drive to an office, I would educate, right? So podcasts, book on tape, etc. Ride home would be music and stuff that gave me that joy and the vitality so that when I walked out of the car, I could decompress from where I was at to be able to be home and come home. And all this happened when I had when I first had a child, right? It was easy to come home to your wife and complain about work and et cetera. But then when you have a child there that wants all of your attention and doesn't care what happened in your day, they just want you to, put on the princess hat, play Barbies for me. It's like that's what I come home to. What is the hack to that separation? How have you found success in that?
I have two hacks. Uh, First one is both of them are super critical and are hard to achieve, I would say. The first one is that I think I was born with it. I have a tendency not to over obsess over things I cannot control. And my learning from my experience of building three companies is that the things that get you up at night and the things that you worry about the most are things that you can't control. And if you focus your energy on the things that you can control, then you'll have solutions for them always. And there's always, okay, this is what we're going to do. Let's see what happens. So my ability to focus my mental energy on things that I can only control prevents me from having a lot of anxiety and stress outside of work. That's the first thing. And so the more you master that and you understand, okay, I cannot control that. Let's just think what I can control here. Let's focus on that. And okay, I solved it. You get that catharsis and you can move forward with the thought. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think it's also really hard for people to really, adopt is I lost my chain of thought here.
It's okay. That was second. It's okay. We can cut this out. So we'll just all right. So we were talking about
just left.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. We were talking about the hacks and not obsessing over the things that you can't control. Great hack to be able to then kind of not compartmentalize, right? But put a stop to the end of your workday to when you have to come home and be husband and dad. So not controlling those things. You said there was a second hack that you had.
And the second hack is that I have this ruthless ability to prioritize my mental balance whenever I'm on the extreme side. So it means that, for example, I had a very long date, back to back calls. I have it's 9 p.m. and I have a call that is important, but it's not life or death call. It's important, maybe like a customer or like a potential customer. I want to close them, etc. But it's not a life or death call. And I know that if I'm going to take it and get back home, I'm going to it's going to create a mayhem as well, like a cascading event, right? You know that there are some these points in your work that you get to, and I can cancel that call and go back home. And I think that being able to ruthlessly prioritize your mental being at extreme situation is the most important thing to just prevent you from tipping over, basically.
I love it. I love it. That's going to prevent you from burning out. That's great. That's great. So how are you? I hope I would love for you to tell me that you play on a beach volleyball league on the weekends to keep up with that. But how are you recharging and staying sharp? Personally, with a high growth, fast moving startup.
Yeah. So, the trifecta for me is family, friends, and sport. I feel like, yeah, if I have a good balance of these three, then I can be in a very good mental shape. Family for me is something that I worked hard on to recharge from it, basically. It's not that easy. It's for especially for fathers, I feel like it's not that intuitive to recharge from your family. You get back home after a day of work, or it's Friday and you spent like the entire week, you're burnt out and you need to prepare breakfast or to go out with the kids or anything like that. And actually, I think I managed to train my mind to recharge from these activities, basically, and to just stand there and say, I have this concept that tell myself that kids are happiness on autopilot, and so that is something that I think they have trained my thought to think like that, and then meeting friends. I have like every week. There's Monday. It's the day actually after this podcast. I'm gonna meet my friends at a bar and we're gonna sit. It's like every week we do it on Mondays evenings, and so I'm gonna meet my friends after this podcast. So it's going to be fun. That's another thing. And the third one is actually I don't play beach volleyball anymore, and it's a sensitive issue. Even I would say I play
We'll
tennis.
keep it for the next podcast. Next podcast.
Next podcast. It's an interesting story, a personal interesting story. Why not? But I play tennis today, and so if I play tennis every week and I meet my friends every week, and I can recharge from the activities from my family, then my mental being is at.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Before we wrap up, I like to ask every guest this question, and I will say, I sent this to Amos in advance, right? So hopefully he could think about it for a second. But when you look back on your journey, both personally and professionally, what's one moment that felt really small at the time, but ended up changing everything for you?
So unfortunately, I feel like you learn more from winning than losing. It's a hard thing to say, but I believe that you learn a lot from losing. Like you learn much more winning. And the first time that I really had like a story that really clicked and started to generate a lot of virality around that and really created meaningful outcome for the business was in Swan. That like after building two companies, telling stories to investors, raising money, things like that. The first time in my life that I really succeeded at that was in Swan, talking about the autonomous business revolution, about cogs in the wheel. You want to flip that and create autonomous employees empowered by AI. And what happened is that I've learned that marketing is more about emotions than analytics. And I until that moment of time when I told the story, I always felt like everything should be in line in a progressive argument that evolves over time because I need to answer the value proposition and convince the investor there's a good addressable market or whatever. And today, I just try to look at the emotions that I'm creating with the people that I'm talking to, and are they what I care more about is like, do they get excited? Do they get happy? Like, am I sparking like positive emotions with the people that I'm talking to? And I feel like that was a realization that was twofold. One, that marketing is more about emotions, but bigger than that, that you learn more from winning rather than losing. And so, to keep that in mind.
Very cool. Very cool. So where can everybody follow you, find you? If someone's interested in building more of an autonomous business, how can they get, more information about Swan? How can we get in touch with you?
Yeah. So, first of all, on LinkedIn, Amos Bar Joseph. I regularly post, as you've read, and I work with AI agents on that as well, so that the content is really good. And I also have a newsletter called The Big Shift. And basically, if you want to follow the journey of Swan, kind of get the behind the scenes of how we're building an autonomous business, the frameworks, the wins and losses, so you can just subscribe to that. And on top of it, I've built kind of like a GPT. It's called like an AI agent inside of Chat GPT that is called Autonomous, and you can just chat with it and ask it questions on how to build an autonomous business. And it would train on all of our playbooks and the stories that we had at Swan. So it's kind of like a direct access to my brain. So maybe Michael would share some of these links after the episode somewhere. And,
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that'd be awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation. I have to tell the listeners that I'm excited to press stop right now so that I can start asking Amos questions for myself personally here, because I didn't want to bore everybody with my own questions here. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I think that this is going to be a really insightful conversation. So thank you so much, Joseph, for going beyond the deal with me today. I hope all the listeners have an amazing day. Let's continue to build something meaningful together.